It was a cold, windy night in New York City. The streets were almost empty, and the tall skyscrapers stood like silent giants under the glowing moon. In the middle of the city stood a huge glass building with golden lights shining from its top floors. Reed Enterprises, one of the biggest companies in the country. Inside, nearly every office was dark, but on the very top floor, one light still burned bright. Mason Reed, the 30-year-old CEO, sat in his corner office, surrounded by files and the faint hum of the city far below. He was known for his discipline, his focus, and his incredible success. People called him a genius, someone who never wasted a minute. He had money, fame, and power, but behind his calm face, Mason carried a heart full of loneliness. He had everything except peace. He sighed, leaning back in his chair and rubbing his temples. It had been another long day of meetings and decisions. Everyone admired him, but admiration isn't the same as affection. His life was all work, no warmth. Just as he was about to close his laptop, he heard something faint, a soft sound echoing through the long, empty hallway. At first, he ignored it, but then it came again. A quiet, muffled sob. Someone was crying. Mason frowned. Who could still be in the building at this hour? He stood up, slipped on his coat, and stepped into the hallway. The sound was clearer now, coming from the janitor's storage room. The hallway lights flickered, and the air was cold. Mason walked slowly, curious. When he reached the door, he paused. The crying was soft, but full of pain. He gently pushed the door open, and there she was. A young woman sat on the floor, hugging her knees. Her cleaning cart stood beside her, and a broken mop lay on the tiles. Her name tag read Emily Carter. She wore an old blue uniform, and her shoes were worn out. Her hair was tied back loosely, and her eyes were swollen from tears. Mason just stood there, watching silently. Something inside him stirred, an emotion he hadn't felt in years. The pain in her eyes looked too real to ignore. He cleared his throat softly. "Excuse me," he said. Emily gasped and quickly stood up, wiping her tears. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll clean the floor right now. Please don't report me. I wasn't sleeping. Mason raised his hand gently. "It's okay. You don't have to explain. I just wanted to make sure you're all right." Emily looked confused. No one had ever asked her that before, especially not a man in an expensive suit. I broke the mop," she said softly. "My supervisor will be angry again. I already got in trouble last week for being slow." Mason stepped closer and looked at the mop. The wooden handle had snapped in half. He picked it up, examined it, then crouched down and fixed the broken end with a simple twist. "There," he said with a small smile. "Good as new." Emily blinked in surprise. "You fixed it?" "Looks that way," Mason replied. "I used to help my mom with cleaning when I was a kid." Emily smiled faintly. "Really? I didn't think someone like you ever had to clean anything." Mason chuckled softly. "Everyone starts somewhere." For the first time that night, Emily laughed a little. A soft, nervous laugh that made Mason's chest feel strangely warm. She thanked him quietly and tried to gather her things. But before Mason could say another word, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. A man's voice shouted, "Emily, what are you doing in here? You're supposed to finish the lobby by now." Emily froze. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lewis. I don't want excuses," the supervisor barked. "If you can't do your job properly, there are plenty of others who will." Mason's eyes narrowed. He stayed quiet, watching the scene carefully. Emily lowered her head. "I'll finish right away," she whispered. When the supervisor stormed off, Mason said quietly, "He shouldn't talk to you like that." Emily shook her head quickly. "Please, sir, don't say anything. He'll fire me. I need this job." Mason saw the desperation in her eyes and stopped himself from arguing. "All right," he said softly, "but promise me one thing. Don't let anyone make you feel small." Emily gave a faint smile. That's easy to say when you're not the one being yelled at. Mason smiled sadly. You'd be surprised how often I get yelled at. She looked at him curiously. There was something kind about this man, but she didn't know who he was. She thought maybe he was just another employee working late. Thank you for being nice to me, she said. Most people don't even look at us. Her words hit Mason's heart. They should, he said. Everyone deserves respect. Emily nodded slowly. I should go before Mr. Lewis comes back. Wait, Mason said as she picked up her bucket. What's your name? Emily, she replied softly. Emily Carter. He smiled. I'm Mason. Nice to meet you, Mason, she said, then turned and walked down the hallway, her shoes making soft echoes on the marble floor. Mason stood there for a long time, staring after her. He didn't know why, but her sadness had shaken something deep inside him. Later, back in his office, he couldn't focus. He sat by the window, looking down at the glittering city. All he could think about was Emily. Her tired eyes, her broken mop, and the way she still managed a small smile. He wondered what her story was. That night, he drove home through the quiet streets, but his heart wasn't quiet. He had met thousands of people in his life, but no one had ever caught his attention like that simple cleaner girl. When he reached his penthouse, the city lights filled the room. Everything looked perfect. The elegant furniture, the silence, the luxury. Yet Mason felt strangely empty. He took off his jacket and sat on the couch, still thinking about her. Emily Carter, he whispered to himself, a name he didn't want to forget. Hours passed, but he couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, Mason felt something real, a connection. He didn't know it yet, but that single moment in the empty building was the start of a story that would change his life forever. And while Emily probably forgot about the stranger who fixed her mop, Mason Reed knew deep inside this was not the last time he would see her. Something about that night felt like destiny. The next morning, Mason Reed sat in his enormous office, staring blankly at the computer screen. The city skyline behind him glowed in the early sunlight, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. He couldn't stop thinking about Emily Carter, the cleaner he'd met the night before. Her tired face, her soft voice, and her quiet strength had somehow stayed with him all night long. For years, Mason had lived a strict, emotionless routine. Meetings, contracts, deals, and deadlines. But that brief encounter had broken his pattern. There was something about Emily he just couldn't explain. She was different from anyone he'd ever known. He picked up his phone and called the HR department. Can you send me the employee records for the cleaning staff working night shifts? He asked, his voice calm and steady. Within minutes, the file appeared in his inbox. As he scrolled through the names, he found hers. Emily Carter, 24 years old, working full-time night shifts for 6 months. No college record, but with excellent performance notes. The only remark in her file said, hard-working, quiet, polite, never complains. Mason leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. Never complains, he murmured to himself. That was the part that got to him the most. Someone who faced so much pain and still stayed so strong. He respected that. A few hours later, his assistant entered with his coffee. Mason looked up. Can you find out which hospital Emily Carter's mother is admitted to? The assistant hesitated for a second. Sir? He asked, confused. Just do it quietly, Mason said. No questions. By evening, the answer came. A small public hospital in Brooklyn. Mason didn't say anything, but his mind immediately started working on a plan. That night, he stayed at the office again. He pretended he had more work to do, but deep down, he was waiting. He knew Emily would arrive around 10, just like the previous night. When she finally appeared, pushing her cleaning cart, she looked surprised to see him again. You're here late again, Mr. Mason, she said softly. He smiled. Seems like we both have bad timing. Emily laughed lightly, her voice echoing in the quiet hall. I don't think mine counts as bad timing. It's just my job." Mason walked a little closer. "Still, you shouldn't have to work this late every night." She shrugged gently. "Sometimes life doesn't give you a choice." He nodded, understanding more than she knew. "Mind if I stay here while you clean?" Emily looked uncertain for a moment, then smiled shyly. "Sure, if you don't mind a little noise." Mason sat by the window while she worked. He watched her move quietly around the office, dusting the desks, sweeping the floor, wiping the glass. She was so focused and calm. There was a certain grace in her simplicity. After a while, Mason broke the silence. "You know, you don't talk much." Emily glanced at him. "That's because people don't usually listen." Her answer surprised him. "I'm listening," he said softly. She smiled a little. "Then maybe you're not like most people here." For the next few minutes, they talked. Mason asked about her life, and she slowly began to open up. She told him how her father had passed away 2 years ago, how her mother had fallen sick shortly after, and how she had to drop out of college to take care of her. "I wanted to be a teacher," she said, her voice quiet but filled with emotion. "But dreams don't pay hospital bills." Mason looked at her, feeling something heavy in his chest. "That's not fair," he said. "You deserve better." Emily smiled sadly. "Fair doesn't exist for people like me. We just keep going." There was silence for a moment, the kind that says more than words ever could. Then, suddenly, the loud, grating voice of her supervisor shattered the peace. "Emily, why are you still here? This floor should have been done 20 minutes ago." Emily jumped slightly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lewis. I was just—" "Excuses again," he snapped. "If you don't finish by midnight, don't bother coming tomorrow." Mason stood up instantly, his jaw tightening. "That's enough," he said firmly. The supervisor turned around, shocked. "Sir, this is not your concern." "Actually, it is," Mason said coldly. "She's working late, and she's doing her job well. You don't talk to people like that under my roof." Mr. Lewis turned pale. He stuttered. "Yes, sir, I'll go check the other floor." Then he quickly scurried away. Emily stood there, frozen. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Now he'll just be more angry tomorrow." Mason softened his tone. "He won't. I'll make sure of it." She gave him a thankful smile, though her eyes still showed worry. "You're really kind, Mr. Mason, but you shouldn't get involved in things like this. People might talk." He chuckled. "Let them talk." Emily finished her work silently after that, and Mason even helped her carry some boxes to the supply room. When she turned to thank him, he said gently, "If you ever need help, just ask. Don't fight everything alone." She looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "Thank you, but I'm used to being alone." When she left that night, Mason watched her walk down the hallway again, just like before. But this time, it wasn't just curiosity he felt. It was concern. Later, Mason drove to his penthouse, but he couldn't relax. The city lights outside his window looked the same, but something inside him was changing. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about profit, meetings, or money. He was thinking about someone else's pain. He opened his laptop and began typing an email to his finance team. It was short but powerful. Effective immediately. Set up a private fund for employee family medical emergencies. Use my personal account to start it. Anonymous donations only. He hit send and leaned back in his chair. He felt strangely satisfied, not because of the money, but because he was finally doing something truly good for someone who deserved it. The next day, Emily got a call from the hospital. Her mother's treatment was now fully covered by a new Employee Health Assistance Program. She couldn't believe it. Tears filled her eyes as she thanked the doctor. She had no idea who had made it happen, but she silently prayed for that person's happiness. That night, when she went to work, she looked brighter. Mason noticed it right away. "You seem happier today," he said with a smile. Emily nodded. "The hospital called. My mom's treatment is paid for. I don't know who helped, but it feels like a miracle." Mason smiled faintly. Maybe the world finally decided to be kind. She looked at him and said, "I hope you get some kindness too, Mr. Mason. You look like someone who carries too much alone." Her words caught him completely off guard. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not in business meetings, not at parties, not even his closest friends. She saw right through him. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. Finally, he said softly, "Maybe I just needed someone to remind me what kindness feels like." They both smiled quietly. As the night went on, Mason sat near the window, watching her work. He noticed how she hummed softly while wiping the desks, how she paused sometimes to rest her aching hands, and how she never complained, not even once. He admired her more with every passing minute. She was strong in ways most people couldn't see. When Emily finally finished her shift, she said, "Good night, Mr. Mason." He nodded. "Good night, Emily." After she left, Mason stayed there, looking at the empty hallway. He felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in years. It was strange. The company he had built from the ground up had never made him feel this kind of peace, but a poor cleaner with a kind heart did. As he turned off the lights, he whispered to himself, "Maybe this is the beginning of something real." He didn't know it yet, but Emily had already changed him in ways no one else ever could. And fate was preparing another meeting, one that would reveal a truth neither of them ever expected. The next week felt different for Mason. Every evening he found himself lingering in his quiet office, pretending to work late. But really, he was just waiting for the familiar, gentle sound of Emily's cleaning cart rolling down the hallway. She had, somehow, become the calm in the constant noise of his life. Her soft laughter, echoing in the empty building, was a sound he hadn't realized he was missing. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Mason found himself smiling for no reason at all. One evening, the city lights below were a soft, glittering carpet. They sat together by the large office window, a comfortable silence between them. As Emily gently wiped dust from a shelf, she looked over at him. "You should go home, Mason. You work too hard." He let out a soft chuckle, his eyes meeting hers. "Only when you're around. Otherwise, the place just feels empty." A shy smile touched her lips as she poured him a cup of coffee from her flask. "You talk like someone who doesn't have everything." His own smile faded slightly. "Maybe I don't," he admitted, his voice quiet. "Money doesn't exactly keep you warm at night." The room grew still, the silence filled only by the distant hum of the city. They just sat there, watching the lights, two people from different worlds sharing a single moment. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. The office door flew open and Mr. Collins, a senior manager, rushed in, looking flustered. "Sir, the board meeting—" He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes darting from Mason to Emily, who was still holding the coffee mug. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had company, Mr. Reed." Emily froze. The mug slipped in her grasp, coffee sloshing over the side. "Mr. Reed," she whispered, the name foreign on her lips. Mason's face went pale. This wasn't how he wanted her to find out. This wasn't the plan. "You're the CEO?" she asked, her voice trembling, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. Mason shot up from his chair. "Emily, please, let me explain." But she was already backing away, a wall instantly rising between them. "You let me talk about my life, my struggles, while you hid yours. You watched me clean your office." "I wasn't hiding to laugh at you," he said, his voice desperate. I just wanted to be seen as a person, not as a boss." She shook her head, her eyes welling with tears of betrayal and humiliation. "You don't understand what it feels like," she choked out, "to be small in someone else's world." Before he could say another word, she grabbed her cart, the rattling of the wheels a jarring sound as she hurried out of the room. "Emily!" Mason called after her, but the hallway had already swallowed her footsteps, leaving him alone in the crushing silence. The next few days were hollow. Emily didn't come to work. Her locker stood empty, a silent testament to her absence. The entire building felt lifeless without her gentle presence, without the sound of her humming or the warmth of her smile. Mason tried calling, texting, anything, but every number went unanswered. The silence was deafening. One rainy evening, the loneliness became too much to bear. He couldn't stay away any longer. He drove to the small apartment address he'd managed to find in her employee file, the city a blur of wet streets and flickering neon signs. Standing at her door, his heart pounded against his ribs. He took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened slowly. Emily stood there, looking tired, her eyes shadowed, but calm. "Mason," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I had to see you," he replied, his own voice unsteady. "Please, just hear me out." She didn't speak, but after a long moment she stepped aside, letting him into the small apartment. It was modest, but immaculately clean, filled with a warmth that defied its size. His eyes landed on a collection of medicine bottles on a small side table. "Your mother?" he asked gently. She nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. "She's at the hospital. She's the reason I work nights." Mason nodded, his heart aching for her. "I know. I asked HR about you after you left. That's how I found out." She looked up, surprise flickering in her tired eyes. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because I care," he said simply, earnestly, "and because I wanted to help." A heavy sigh escaped her lips. "You already helped enough, by lying." "I didn't lie," he said softly, taking a hesitant step closer. I waited for the right time to tell you the truth, and I waited too long." She looked away, toward the rain-streaked window. "You really think love can happen between a CEO and a cleaner?" Mason's heart clenched. He closed the remaining distance between them. "I think love can happen between two souls who see each other clearly. That's all I ever wanted." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the steady tapping of rain against the glass. Finally, her voice soft but firm, Emily said, "I don't know if I can trust you again." Mason nodded slowly, the acceptance of her words a physical blow. "Then I'll wait," he promised. "I'll wait until you can." He turned to leave, his shoulders slumped in defeat. But before walking out, he placed a white envelope on the table. "For your mother," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "No strings attached." As he reached the door, she called out, her voice laced with confusion. "Mason, why? Why do you keep doing this?" He turned back, a sad, small smile on his face. "Because loving you," he confessed, "isn't a choice anymore." And with that, he walked out into the cold, pouring rain. Later that night, Emily sat by her mother's hospital bed, the sterile room quiet except for the beeping of monitors. Her mother noticed the silent tears tracing paths down her daughter's cheeks and reached out to take her hand. "It's that young man, isn't it?" Emily just nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "He's rich, Mom. He's a CEO. I'm nobody." Her mother smiled gently, her grip tightening ever so slightly. "If he makes your heart feel safe, my dear, that's what matters. Don't push love away just because it looks different than you expected." Emily stared out the hospital window at the rain, her mother's words echoing in her mind. She thought of his kindness, his sad smile, the way he looked at her as if she was the only person in the room. Deep inside, beneath the hurt and the anger, she felt his kindness pulling at her heart, a gentle, persistent tide. Maybe, just maybe, he was different. Maybe this was real. Maybe love deserves one more chance. The hospital felt different now. The constant beeping of machines had faded, replaced by the quiet rustle of my mom turning the pages of a magazine. Hope, once a distant dream, was now a warm presence in the small room. A few weeks had passed, and my mom was finally getting better. Every morning, I'd visit her before my cleaning shift, my mind always drifting back to that rainy night, to Mason. I hadn't seen him since, but his words were etched into my heart. Loving you isn't a choice anymore. One afternoon, the sun streamed through the window as I helped Mom sign the last of her discharge papers. The nurse handed them back with a kind smile. "Everything's all settled, Miss Carter. Your bills are cleared." I blinked, confused. Cleared? But I haven't paid yet. The nurse just shrugged. "It was an anonymous donor. They said you'd understand." My breath caught in my throat. My chest tightened and I whispered his name to myself. Mason. That evening, the walk home felt longer than usual. The city lights blurred as I replayed everything in my head. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe he wasn't trying to control my life with his money. Maybe he was just trying to care. Meanwhile, miles away, in a glass-walled office high above the city, Mason stared out at the sprawling skyline. He couldn't get me out of his head. The big business meetings felt hollow, the victories tasteless. Success just wasn't the same without someone to share it with. He finally turned from the window, a new resolve in his eyes. He buzzed his assistant. "Prepare a list of all community programs our company supports. I want to add one, something focused on helping employees continue their education." His assistant, taken aback, asked, "Any particular reason, sir?" A faint, sad smile touched Mason's lips. "Because everyone," he said softly, "deserves a second chance." 2 days later, the company's annual employee gathering was in full swing at a local park. Twinkling lights were strung between the trees, music drifted through the air, and the smell of food from different stalls was irresistible. I hadn't wanted to come, but my friend from housekeeping, Sarah, had practically dragged me here. "Come on, it'll be fun," she'd insisted with a mischievous grin. "Maybe you'll see that mysterious CEO you ran away from." I'd laughed nervously. "Very funny, Sarah." I tried to stay hidden at the back, hovering near the refreshment table and pretending to be fascinated by the selection of sodas. And then I saw him. Mason was standing on a small makeshift stage, a microphone in his hand. He wasn't the imposing, intimidating figure I remembered from his office. His voice was calm, almost humble as he addressed the crowd. "This company isn't built by one man," he began, his eyes scanning the faces of his employees. "It's built by hundreds of hardworking people. People who give their nights, their strength, and their hearts to make us what we are." He paused, taking a breath. "And it's time we gave something back. Starting today, we're launching a new scholarship program for any employee who wants to return to their studies." A wave of applause and cheers erupted from the crowd, but I just stood there, frozen. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the lights. He remembered. He had listened to me. He had actually listened. After the event wound down, people started to leave. Mason stepped off the stage and his eyes found me immediately, standing quietly under a large oak tree. For a heart-stopping moment, the bustling park, the music, the chatter, it all just faded away. There was only him and me. He walked towards me, his steps slow and deliberate. "Emily," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I looked up, my heart pounding in my chest. "You didn't have to do all this," I managed to say. He shook his head, a gentle smile on his face. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because of you. You showed me what real strength looks like." I dropped my gaze, staring at my worn-out shoes. "You've changed a lot." He smiled again, a genuine, warm smile this time. "You taught me how?" A soft breeze rustled the leaves above us and the stage lights cast a gentle glow on our faces. I finally found the courage to say what was on my mind. "I was angry because I thought you saw me as a charity case." Mason took a step closer, closing the small distance between us. "I saw you as the only person who ever looked at me like a man, not a CEO." My eyes softened. All the anger and resentment I'd been holding on to just melted away. "And now?" I asked softly. "Now," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I just want to spend my life proving that I'm worthy of you." For a long moment we just stood there, the silence between us filled with unspoken words. Then a slow smile spread across my face, and I felt the tears I'd been holding back finally fall. "Maybe I was wrong about you, Mason Reed." He let out a soft chuckle of relief. "I've been hoping you'd say that." He held out his hand, his palm open and inviting. "May I?" I hesitated for just a second before placing my hand in his. His touch was warm, steady, and so incredibly real. "I don't know where this will go," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "Then let's find out together," he replied, his thumb gently stroking the back of my hand. We stood there under the city lights, surrounded by the faint sounds of laughter and music. But in that perfect moment, it felt like the world had stopped just for us. Weeks turned into months. I enrolled in the new program, studying part-time while still working. My life had a new purpose, a new direction. I found myself visiting Mason's office often, not as a cleaner with a bucket and mop, but as a friend, as someone who was finally starting to believe in her dreams again. He was my biggest supporter, always there with a word of encouragement, never boasting about what he'd done, never trying to control my path, just being there. One evening, we were watching the sunset from his office window, the sky painted in brilliant shades of orange and purple. I turned to him and said softly, "Do you ever miss your old life? The one before you met me?" He smiled, not taking his eyes off the horizon. "No, because that life was only half alive." I couldn't help but laugh. "You're still really bad at romantic lines." He grinned, turning to face me. "Then maybe you should teach me." Our laughter filled the quiet office, blending with the fading light of the day, a perfect harmony. The story could have ended there, a quiet, happy ending. But our story was destined for the headlines. Months later, a small news article popped up online, the title bold and clear. CEO Mason Reed marries former cleaner Emily Carter. Proof that true love has no class. The camera fades to a simple, beautiful wedding by a sun-dappled lake. There are no crowds, no paparazzi, just our closest friends and family. As Mason gently straightens my veil, I whisper, "You still make me nervous." He smiles, his eyes full of love. "Good. That means the love's still real." And as we walk forward, hand in hand, with the sun setting behind us, it's clear. We were two people from completely different worlds, brought together to create one story of love that, against all odds, shocked everyone. Thank you so much for watching our story unfold. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. We'll see you soon.